What's up everybody, it's Paul from LastLevelTech, and I thought I'd come back with a video of something I think is pretty special for 2016. And what you see in front of you is the Zotac ZBOX gaming mini PC. In this particular model is the Magnus EN1070. So I thought I'll show you this bare bones slim PC and maybe take some time during this video. I might make it a bit longer than usual to show the power of this little box off and see what it can and can't do. So first of all, here's the box itself. Usual kind of stuff on the box. Magnus EN1070. So we can see here, it gives us some information about what's actually there. So we've got the front of the box, you've got a SDXC card reader, a USB 3 slot, a USB 3.1 Type-C slot, microphone, headphones. On the back, you've got two DisplayPort 1.3, I believe, two HDMI 2.0, two Ethernet ports, an antenna connector for Wi-Fi if you wanted to use that, USB 3.0, two connectors and two USB 2.0 connectors and a power connector. And it tells us here it uses DDR4 memory, ultra-fast bandwidth it calls it, it's VR ready, and of course it's a GeForce GTX graphics, which in this case is the full-fat NVIDIA 1070, the new Pascal graphics card. So compressed and put into this little box. It's not a mobility chip or anything else, this is the full chip, and we'll go into some of those details a bit later on. On the side, you can just see here, it says VR ready, DDR4 memory, 4K Ultra HD, 802.11 AC, HD audio, SDXC card reader, dual gigabit, so everything I've just said before. And let's see here. There, I'm just going to hide the serial number, but you can just about make out if I just focus in there. So the CPU is an Intel Core i5 6400T, so that's a quad core 2.2 gigahertz up to 2.8 gigahertz chip. So it's the low power end chip, but hopefully we'll see if it's any use for what this is. Full fat, like I said, NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1070 with 8 gig of DDR5. Internal expansion is two DDR4 SO-DIMM slots, 1866 or 2133 megahertz. There's an M.2 SSD PCIe 4.x4 slot and a standard 2.5-inch SATA 6.0 gigabit slot for HDD or SSD. Networking, dual gigabit LAN, and Wi-Fi 802.11 AC, Bluetooth 4.0, and then the usual stuff of your two HDMI 2.0 to DisplayPort 1.3s, power supply which is up to 19.5 volts up to 180 watts, and the dimensions, so 210mm by 203mm by 62.2mm, so it's quite small for what we're looking for here. But let's open it up and check it out. Okay, so in the box, let's zoom back out a bit. Okay, so we've got a top tray, which is a power supply, which is a Delta Electronics power supply. I can just zoom in there again, which just kind of confirms the outage, the input and the output of the power supply itself. They give us two types of plug adapters, so that's the European plug adapter in this instance, and this one is the UK plug adapter. So I'm just going to take this apart, so see what I'm going to use here. And we also get a Wi-Fi antenna as well, 2.4 gigahertz / 5 gigahertz written on it, which you can just see, which I might put on later. We'll see. I might put on now, whatever. Okay. So that's the top layer. Now we can put that to one side. So the second layer, first of all, we've got Zotac ZBOX, creator of the original mini PC. Let's see what's in here. Push the limit. Okay. So we've got a Zotac sticker. Manual. So ignite the possibilities. Load your PC with some more Zotac advertisements. There's a user manual, It's quite chunky actually compared to what I thought it would be, although it's in multiple languages, so it's probably only about 2 or 3 pages that are relevant to each individual person. Quick start guide as well. Standard stuff if you're anywhere used to using a PC at all. And what else have we got here? So the driver is not a CD, it's a read-only USB stick, which is quite cool. I quite like that idea. Or is there a CD here as well? Oh, there is a CD, okay. But also a read-only memory stick. So I think they've got all bases covered in that particular instance, which is quite nice. So put that back. So that's the manuals and stuff. And here's the actual units. And that's it. That's everything you get in the box. So let's move this out of the way. Okay. Alright. So this is it. This is the Zotac EN1070 gaming mini PC. And it's quite small. It is very small. So you can see on the back, there's your ports on the back. And it's got a huge copper heatsink inside there. So power, 2 USBs, 2.0, 2 USB 3.0. Here's your HDMI's, your display ports, gigabit, and Wi-Fi antenna. And there's a couple of vents and stuff you can see along the top. Nothing too amazing insofar as what the venting is like. We've got massive copper heatsink inside of there as well, which I presume is related to, one of these will be GPU related and one will be CPU related, I guess. But I'm guessing that's what they use to keep this device reasonably cool for what it's going to do. Considering it's got a full fat 1070 in there, I would imagine it's going to get hot. So, as this is a bare bones machine, you don't get a hard drive and you don't get memory and you don't get an operating system. So they're quite open with that. They do say that on the front of the box, which we can see here, just to point it out. So bare bones, make your own mini PC, install your SODIMM memory, your storage, and your choice of operating system. So at least that's up front. And to get into the box, which we have here, actually put this in comparison. If I just put this down here, here's a standard Blu-ray box. It's you know, it's quite impressive for what it is. I mean, it's smaller than a PS4 and an Xbox One. So there's the kind of the thickness you're looking at. So in that instance, that's impressive. Hopefully performance lives up to what it's billed as. So anyway, on the back we've got 2 screws, which you just take off, and you've got a little thumb slot here to pull forward and pop the back off. So just like that. Okay, now as you can see, move this over a little bit and zoom in a bit. Okay, I have already installed memory and storage that I'm going to use on this device. So in the middle here we've got the SSD for the M.2 SSD, which I'm using as a boot drive. In this instance, it's a 256 gig SSD from SanDisk. The HyperX DDR4, this is a 16 gig RAM chip. It's 2133 megahertz. Obviously there's a space for another one for dual channel mode if you wanted to do that. And on the storage side, let me try and show you this a bit better. There's a little tab here which you unscrew that screw there, and this whole kind of bay area, this kind of little bay which you can see that this is plugged into, this it's a plastic kind of cover that takes the hard drive. Yeah, you just unscrew that, pop it out, put your hard drive into it, and there's little notches on the plastic, pop it in, job done. So I'm using a drive I ripped out of my old PS4, which I've got rid of now, the PS4 and the Xbox One, because I just never used them. So this is just a 2 terabyte Samsung drive. You could put an SSD in here for performance, And for sure, from the testing I've done on this so far, it would improve things. But I wanted storage more than performance in this instance. I wanted, you know, to be able to store quite a lot of games on this unit. So let's get it set up, and I'll show you what I've done with it. And I'm just going to put it to one side here. Oops, what have I done here? Okay. Oh, on the wrong side, that's why. So yeah, you just pop it back on, slide it back into place. It's quite simple when you do it right. And just plug in the screws. Just tighten the screws. Okay, so I've already installed everything I need to install on this. And one thing I will say is, as I've taken this off, you will have probably noticed the airflow that's going to go inside the bottom of this unit is just through these vents. That's all there is. It's just these vents on the side at the bottom. There's no fan or anything else that's going to shove air through there. So your hard disks, your storage is going to get reasonably warm in there. Now, I noticed when I was doing Steam restores, the hard drive of the standard hard drive, the temperature was going up to near 60 degrees, which is quite hot. Actually, I can put this on as well. And the SSD was reasonably toasty as well, into the 50s, I think. So maybe, I think it would have been maybe beneficial if Zotac had added an extra, I don't know, maybe 10 millimeters onto this particular base and had wider vents. You know, I don't think it would have hurt the height that much if it was maybe, you know, this high instead of that high, just to make wider vents and possibility of more airflow going in there. It wouldn't have hurt, but I mean, I say the temperatures went up. I didn't notice a massive performance issue, so I'm sure that they've tested it within specification anyway to make sure it's okay. So let's plug all this lot in. So that's my power supply going in. Okay, now, so I've got a little USB dongle here for my keyboard. I'm going to use a wireless keyboard in this instance whilst I do this video. A little multi-touch touchpad and all the rest. Okay, so I'm going to turn on my telly and we'll turn this on. And I'll take you into the BIOS screen first of all. So when you turn it on, this is what you get. 2 beeping noises. You'll see the ring on the front lights up, which is fine. And straight away there's a problem, because I forgot to put the HDMI in. Getting too eager for myself. So let's throw that in. And also I've got an Ethernet cable here as well, so we'll plug that in as well, seeing as we're here. Okay, so yeah, you'll get 2 beeps. The light will light up. If you're using this as a media player, you can turn it off, which is quite good, which I will do as a default. Right, okay, I'm just going to Control-Delete that, if I can. Okay, I'll pan this up. Okay. I don't think it liked that Control-Delete when I did that, so I'll just reset it. You'll see what comes up on the screen anyway. So Zotac ZBOX. I'll take you into the BIOS. Have I got? Helps when I turn the keyboard on. Try that again. Gave the game away a little bit of what you saw there, but never mind. So standard BIOS kind of features. You know, tells you information about what it's running at. This OC for the processor whether the DOC is enabled or not, to go from 2.2 to 2.8. You've got your different features for SATA and display configurations, PC health configuration, power configuration. If you want to, like I say, if you want to turn off the light, that's there. Backlight and support, you can disable that. And then you've got your boot. Now, you've got Legacy or UEFI compatible or pure UEFI. I'm using Legacy in this instance, and I'll show you why in a second. But again, you can go and select all the different types of connectivity and boot options for hard drives. So I'm going to save this and exit. So the reason I'm using the Legacy BIOS is because I have this, which is a custom boot menu setup. So because I want this box to do multiple things, I don't want it to just be a gaming PC. I want it to do everything as possible, as much as I want. So right now I have it set up with a Grub 2 bootloader. So we have LibreELEC, which is a derivative of KODI. It's like a downscale, cut down version of KODI. It's the full version of KODI, but it's purely designed with all the operating system is only the components for KODI itself and nothing else. So I want that to be my media center. That's the default for this particular unit, because my idea is that this will go under a television downstairs in my living room. Windows 10 for Pro x64, which will be used for gaming on the Windows platform. SteamOS to run SteamOS and check out what that platform is like for different games, especially using the power of the GTX 1070. And Parted Magic 2012 has been ripped from the Hiren's Boot CD, which is a Linux distro which I can get into to perform little tasks like drive partitioning or changing or copying. Clonezilla, you can see on there, that kind of stuff is all built in. So let's run LibreELEC first. Let's see if it runs okay for me. So this is the one of the beta versions of LibreELEC 8, I think, which is coming out soon, which is based off KODI 17.1 or something like that, which is the Krypton version of KODI. So here you go. Of course, because this is full KODI, I can do what I like. I can customize this as much as I please. You know, I can put all kinds of different skins on there, add-ons, everything else. This is just a flat version of KODI, which I'm showing you right now. But what I wanted to demonstrate in this instance is, because I have this set up to an amplifier down here. You can see this Onkyo amplifier, which I'll pan out to. That can do Dolby Atmos and DTS X. I've got some Dolby Atmos style speakers in this place, and I just wanted to show you, you know, obviously this will play pretty much every format going. In this instance, maybe I'll just show you, I'll just turn down the volume of this because I don't want YouTube to come after me. So this is a Dolby Atmos test. You can get these all for free off the web, but you'll see when I do this, I just bring up the information. So it's using the VDPAU, which is the hardware for NVIDIA, and it's playing away. And if I scroll down and take the camera down here, you'll see that it's running with Dolby Atmos, which, if I can focus in there a little bit, it's juggling my camera. There you go. So that's lit up. It's got Dolby True HD. It's plugged into the auxiliary port at the moment, and that's playing away quite happily. So it does the high definition audio formats. So you might say, okay, well, that's Dolby Atmos. Is it? That's, you know, that Atmos is built off a Dolby True HD soundtrack. It's just extra data in there. So Dolby True HD works as well. But let's just say you wanted to try DTSX, which is the newer format that's just come out. And again, if I scroll down here, you'll see we've got Dolby True HD, and DTSX is lit up as well, which is good. So those formats play pretty much perfectly. And you can see again, it's using the hardware decoding for this 1080p image. And I can stop that again. You can get them free. There's links off the KODI website and everything else to get those tests. What I did notice is, in some of the testing I've done so far for UHD content, at the moment This is still in beta, obviously, so it might be some issues, but it's kind of jerky a little bit because you can see it's using the HTPC on software. So that's taxing the CPU. And you can see the video stream is 3840 by 2160. So I need to double check and see how to get that running in hardware, but that will be obviously a lot more stable once running in hardware. It might just be a factor that this is running in beta at the moment, or beta, whichever you want to call it. So that's the first thing. So let's reboot this. So I'll do SteamOS next, and I'll show you what that looks like. Again, all I need to do is just go up and select from their menu. I want to play SteamOS. And of course, with SteamOS, you get the different control methods that go with that. Let me just turn this back a bit. Okay, it takes about 30 seconds, 40 seconds, I suppose, to load up. There we go. And you can see my profile is already logged in. Okay, so controlling SteamOS, you can either use the keyboard and mouse like I've done before. You can use your Steam controller, which is a simple job of just plugging in the little dongle that comes with it and turning it on. And then afterwards it's you can see it's picked up my Steam controller for my profile straight away. Game wise, I've just installed a few games on this. So these are the Steam versions of these games. So let's try, I'll quickly just load up Rocket League. Now, if you wanted to use an Xbox controller, or Xbox One or 360 controller, you can use them, but they have to be wired. The wireless adapters don't work at the moment. The other thing is, this TV is a Samsung UE55 KS8000, which is a 55-inch Ultra HD TV. But SteamOS doesn't support any resolutions beyond 1080p, which is good. So I'll just go into free play now and just show you briefly what it looks like. But yeah, runs pretty flawlessly from what I can see. Again, the performance isn't as good as what I've seen on the PC, especially for games like this where it could run a lot better. I'll show you on the PC later maybe, and you can run this in UHD mode, no problem. But yeah, it's pretty much flawless. I can't find anywhere at the moment on Steam to kind of say, can you just show me the frames per second for this particular game in SteamOS, but it feels fluid enough. It feels like it's pretty close to 60. If not, I'd be very surprised. And then you can do whatever and score. But yeah, that works pretty fine. And let me quit this game. And we can go back and I could say I want to try Borderlands 2. I'm only giving you a brief overview of what the games kind of look like on Steam because, like I say, the Steam OS limits you to 1080p. You can't play around with things as much sometimes as what you can in the Windows versions of the games. They work fine, but they probably wouldn't be my platform of choice for some of these games. But I thought for this video, I think it's a good thing to show that this box, this Zotac EN1070, can handle SteamOS just as much as it can handle Windows and KODI and Linux and everything else. So this is Borderlands 2. Let's go back to where I was. Okay, in the middle. I'm at the very start of the game. I literally just started it to see what was going on. Now if I go to options. Okay, so VSync is off in this instance. The resolution is set to 1080 and the frame rate is unlimited. You've got everything is set to high or ultra high as much as possible, I think. Again, I don't know of any kind of modes in this game to enable the frames per second, so forgive me for that. But you can hear, I've turned the volume down so it doesn't, like I say, YouTube doesn't flag this, but I've got full movement with my thumb on the Steam controller, which Takes a fair bit of getting used to, I must admit. But yeah, it works pretty well. I don't seem to have too many problems with it. I do think the SteamOS versions of these games run slower than they do on Windows. They look okay, they look fine, but you just get the feeling that when you're playing it on Windows, it feels better. It looks crisper. It's not quite as maybe stuttery or whatever, but it's still perfectly playable, as you can see here as I move around this particular world and try and maybe move a bit faster as I go up to here. I've not played this game, so I'm not entirely sure what the hell I'm doing. Probably the same as Borderlands 1, so... Anyway, like I say, brief demos on Steam, so let's save and quit that. And I can exit the game. And yeah, you can do the usual thing in your library. You can watch videos, you can stream from a Windows PC if you have got a Windows PC running somewhere else, and get your games to run that way. And that's it really. So let's actually let me just show you the settings. So for interfacing audio, you can see there it's running NVIDIA, HDA NVIDIA in digital surround 5.1, so it's picking up the sound okay. That works fine. And there is no interface information really. It just tells you, do you want to enable Linux mode, that kind of thing. But everything I've read up says the SteamOS itself is limited to 1080p, and every game that I've played says that it's limited. The highest resolution I can get in game is 1080p. So let's restart the system again, and I'll get rid of the Steam controller. And maybe spend a bit of time with Windows 10 and the games that we can play from the Steam store, the Origin store, and the Windows store as well. And for that, I'm going to use in this instance, I'm going to test it out with just a wired 360 controller, but you can use a wireless adapter for the Xbox One or the 360. It works fine. I've already done it and tested it, no problem. So let me log in. Okay, so let me focus on what you're seeing here a bit better. Right, so I'll show you the display settings first of all, and we can see that this is indeed running at 3840 by 2160, which is good. And we can look at the CPU-Z and GPU-Z results for this particular device. And I want to point out something interesting I found about the graphics card that's in here. Okay, so if I bring up the generic specifications for the GeForce GTX 1070, the off-the-shelf, what you would buy for now from NVIDIA or its partners. We can go and look at the specs here, and I just want to look at the full specifications. So you'll see here on this side, if I blow out that balloon there a little bit, can I get rid of that? Maybe move the camera a bit. Come back. Okay, so NVIDIA CUDA cores for the standard GTX 1070 are 1920, and the base clock is 1506. The boost clock is 1683. Now, if we look at the GPU in here, we'll see that the GTX 1070, but it's not quite the same. The shader count is 2048. So it's higher than the 1920, but we can see that the standard clock is 1443, so it's lower than the 1506 that is of the original, and the boost clock is 1645, so it's lower than the 1683 of the original. So it's the slightly lower clocks on the actual GPU in this instance, but you get more CUDA cores, so a bit of a balance there, I guess. You can see if I scroll up a little bit and focus in on that, there is some information. Is that going to blow that out a little bit? Okay, it looks okay. There's the information on the CPU. So it's a 14 nanometer Skylake Core i5 6400T CPU at 2.2 gigahertz. That, like I said earlier, it does rise to 2.8 when it's when it's pushing itself on overclocking. Memory is DDR4, which is fine, and yeah, that's in dual channel. That's in single channel mode at the moment. The frequency 2494 megahertz. Interesting. Okay. So that's that, and I just want to load. Oops, what's down? No, go back. No, I don't want to focus on that. Go back here. No. Excuse me. Bear with me for a second. Right. This program here, the Hardware Monitor Pro, which is quite a good little program. So here we can see. Here's my hard drives. Again, do I need to zoom in on this a little bit? There's the temperature of the hard drive at the moment. So we're seeing value at the moment of the temperature is 42 degrees, and the SanDisk is already at 57 degrees. So that's what I was saying to you earlier about maybe if there was a little bit more airflow in there at the bottom of the chassis of this box, that might have been better. I would expect this one to go quite high as well as we try different games out. But there's the temperature of the GTX 1070. The highest it's been so far is only 57. So we'll check that out after we've played a few of the games. And similarly, you can see each core here of the CPU as well is idling around the 50 degree mark right now, just running Windows. If I take you over to this corner of the room here, I'll try to show you this. That's the current wattage that this is using right now. So it's 56 watts while sitting idle. So I think what I'll do is as I play a bit of a demo or a benchmark maybe of Grand Theft Auto or something, I'll set that up so we can see what it's actually using when in full flow, as they say. Right, let's minimize that for now. Okay, so games. Let's start with the Steam store. You can see my information here, and games. Oops, not that one. I want to go to installed. Right, so these are the games I've got in here right now. So I'm going to pick a handful and we'll check them out and see what we've got. So let's start with Grand Theft Auto. Why not? We'll run the benchmark of Grand Theft Auto and I'll show you the settings that we use. Now, regarding the settings, I'm going to try and show you a variety of different configurations and different games. But as with any PC game, if you adjust the settings, if you move things around, you can always get maybe a better, more consistent frame rate for what the particular device you're using is. So in this instance, you know, it might maybe be in the 30 frames per second mark or whatever. But you know, if you change certain things down to different values, then you'll get better frames. I'm only showing you a brief kind of introduction to what I've kind of played with so far. Your mileage may vary in that instance. So at the top left, you can see there's the CPU, which is the temperature and its current usage. So it's 59% usage. The GPU is at 57 degrees, and the clock speed at the moment of what it's doing. So 1443 megahertz. Now, as there is some thermal throttling I've seen in certain instances. As that gets into 70 degrees, that might go down into 1300 megahertz. In other instances, I've seen it go up to 1700 megahertz. It seems to be depending on the game. Memory clock and the memory usage is 8 gig, obviously, of GDDR5 memory on here. The RAM is the system RAM, 16 gig on there. It's only using 3.7 at the moment. And we have D3DX11, so this game uses DirectX11. It's at 63.7 frames per second at the moment. The NVIDIA overlay is on the top right-hand corner, which says 64 for the graphics frames per second at the moment. But let's play around with this and we'll run the benchmark. So now with this particular TV, and you'll find this with a lot of TVs that are running in ultra high definition mode, they'll be set to run 60 Hz at only specific resolutions. So this Samsung KS 8000 only runs 60 Hz at 1080p and Ultra HD. So if I was to select any of these other resolutions, it would only default to 30 Hz. That's all, because the panel can only do that. You can see the refresh rate is dropping as I try and change it. It won't go beyond 30 for those particular resolutions. But if I go to Ultra HD, I can set that back up to 50 or 60, which is okay. So I'm going to turn MSA off, because anti-aliasing when you're running at UHD, some might say you probably don't really need it. So everything else we're going to maybe keep, well, let's set it all to ultra or highest. Let's see what happens. Try and push this as much as possible. Again, you can change these values to maybe improve the performance if needs be, and be happy with the performance that you want to achieve. So cancel, go back, apply those changes. Okay. Takes a second or so to refresh the screen. And yes, that's fine. No, let's go back. Right, okay. So advanced graphics we've got there on. Extended scaling is on. And let's run the benchmark, I guess, and see what happens. Interestingly enough, I thought that this CPU would cripple games in a lot of instances, and when running Grand Theft Auto for the first time, it did actually say this CPU is not meeting the minimum specifications of what the game optimally requires to run. But maybe, as you can see, once this loads, I'm impressed by what it can do, to be fair, especially considering this is running at UHD resolution. So it takes a bit of time to load some of these, again, because, like I said to you earlier, the hard disk I'm running at 2 TB. It's only a 5400 RPM drive. It's not the fastest in the world. Certainly with an SSD in there, this would be a lot better. Help the streaming of assets into the game world, I'm sure, a lot as well. Maybe improve the frame rates that way. But in this instance, I just used what I had here, mainly because of the capacity of the drive. Hopefully in time, maybe when 1 or 2 TB SSDs come down in price, might be worth just swapping this out. So yeah, here we go. 40 frames per second in Ultra HD, 30 frames per second. So considering that the other consoles, the PS4, Xbox One and everything else, were only capable of doing 30 frames per second at not even HD, this little box is doing Ultra HD at greater than 30 frames per second in the majority, with a lot more detail on screen as well. So as this gets really going, I'll try and pan across to the wattage meter and see what we get. And yeah, hopefully this gives you a good idea as to what you can expect from this game. Now, of course, you can change the options. You could leave everything on ultra and go down to 1080p and get 50, 55, maybe even 60 frames per second. Probably without much of an issue, I would have thought, with this graphics card. Noise-wise, I'll try and get my microphone close to this right now. But it's probably the same as a PS4, I'd say. You know, when the PS4 really gets cranked up, it can get quite loud. And this is probably about the same, I would say. But when you have it in a cabinet or whatever and you've got your sound turned on, it's not really that noticeable, if I'm honest. So follow this plane around, and I'll just tip this over to here, so you can see we're using 130 watts at the power supply at the moment, which ain't too bad considering it's a 180 watt rated power supply in there. Still quite a lot of headroom to play with to use this. And so we go back to the game. Getting easily into the 30 frames per second mark, so it's more than playable at Ultra HD. A lot of texture popping in this game, which you get at any point, no matter what graphics card you're using, so don't worry about that if you think that that's a factor of this particular graphics card or this system. It's not. It's certainly something that's inherent on all the benchmarks I've seen of this game. But considering this is a small little PC, I'm highly impressed. You might see a few times as well the CPU usage does go up towards the 90s to 100%. Generally it's in around the 80% mark. It says 97, 93%. So it does tax the CPU, this particular game. Unfortunately I can't get a read on what the frequency of the CPU is, but we can check that afterwards in the Hardware Monitor Pro and see what it actually got up to. I'm just going to let this finish, which is almost done, and then I'll try and maybe play something else. And that's it. So you're, like you say, we're probably averaging around 30 frames per second, I would have thought, for a lot of that game at ultra high definition. It's going to load it up again, unfortunately, which it does. I need to cancel it afterwards. Come on. So what am I running at? 41 minutes already. Right, okay. I'm going to try and keep this video under an hour. Don't want to bore you too much. Okay, quit. Yes, that's fine. Let's try a first-person shooter. Let's go with Doom. Doom obviously supports Vulkan rendering, GPU rendering, as well as OpenCL. And from what I tested, they were pretty much the same in this on this configuration of machine. So 1080p Ultra was pretty much no problem with this game. Absolutely no problem on this system. It just ran with all the settings flawlessly. I don't think I dropped any frames. Maybe got down to 59 maybe once. But from an Ultra HD perspective, I'll show you what it can do. So again, my requirement for this game, oh actually this is another thing before I get onto that, the load times on this game with this hard drive are particularly bad. It's probably the worst game I've seen out of all of them for some particular reason. I have no idea why. But even just getting to the menus, it's really slow. It's like a good 30, 40, 50 seconds before it gets to where you need. I had no idea why in comparison to other games. But my goal with this system was I wanted something that would sit underneath TV in the living room and perform multiple functions. So primarily as a media box to watch some of my stored media, and after that as a gaming machine as well. So just all in one unit that does everything. I just have to boot it up, flick to a particular mode that I want it to be, and it will do it as I want. And I have to say, I was expecting reasonable performance from this. Like, you know, 1080p stuff generally I would have expected no problem, especially with the GTX 1070. And I did worry that the i5 6400, which is a low voltage power, it's only a 35 watt CPU, would really cripple certain games. And from what I've seen, I'm pleasantly surprised. I'm really, really pleasantly surprised of how much it performs in a lot of ways to keep things running as smooth as possible, especially for the form factor. Like I said, the only thing I would say about the form factor is that maybe the base could have been a bit larger just for airflow. Let's go into arcade mode in here. We'll just go into the UAC. That's fine. yeah, just for airflow on the hard drives, you know, that might have been nice, but from what I've seen from performance from playing for a couple of hours, it's not really had any major issue or any degradation on the performance of the system itself. Now, what's this doing? Is this still loading? It is again. So yeah, I'm quite happy with what this does. Let's go to the settings of this game and see what we've got set to. Okay, so this is 1080p. Okay, right. And if I go to advanced, that's fine. So we've got everything set to ultra. So this is a good demonstration of what we can get from this game. Start run. So you've got 105 frames per second, 120, 110. You know, consoles couldn't even touch this at those kind of frame rates at 1080p. So I'm going to bring in some bad guys in here. And we'll cut through here. Oops. Do that. 130 frames per second, so I'd pretty much blitz in this game at 1080p without breaking a sweat. You can see the megahertz that this, the speed of this GPU and CPU at the moment, our temperatures as well. Okay, so let's do that, and then let's pause this and go to settings and video. Let's up this to UHD. So I'm going to keep it at ultra, and you can see straight away how much the frame rate takes a hit. Just going to UHD mode. So the fan is spinning up a little bit harder on this now, but again, it's not overly too bad. So we're at 51 frames per second, so we've knocked it down by about 40 frames per second, but it's still very much playable. Oops. Not saying I'm very good at playing this game, but especially with an Xbox 360 controller. Mouse and keyboard all the way. But yeah, you know, if you were playing this in UHD, you may want to drop a few settings down to medium, and just to keep it at that 60. There you go, and down to 40 frames per second there. So, but still, well above the norm, the 30 frames per second norm of consoles. Especially as you've got the PlayStation Pro coming out next week. A lot of games are still going to be their checkerboard technique, which is 2K basically, but still limited to 30 frames per second. You know, the remasters of certain things will be 60 frames per second for sure, but you know, I think it's hard to compare, and I'm certainly more impressed with what this does as a little unit, and it's still smaller than a PS4 from what I can gather. So that's Doom. So 50, 49 frames per second, 44, 49. So you could definitely change things in there in the options to, you know, anti-aliasing is off at the moment, but why would you want it on at UHD? But you could change things down here to maybe medium or high in certain instances to get that back up to the desired 60 frames per second if that's what you wanted. So there's plenty of options there, which is good. Let's show you. This has just come out, which is the Call of Duty Modern Warfare Remaster. And again, I think this works at UHD pretty much maxed out at 60 frames per second, if I remember right. But we'll check. What are we at? 48 minutes. Okay. I think what I'll try and do is show you a Windows Store game and a Origin game as well. Okay, campaign. Let's resume that. Crew expendable. Defining map in the Call of Duty series, I would say. I would be interested to see how much of a difference it makes if the hard drive was an SSD. Would it improve performance? I can't imagine it's going to be by a vast amount, but you know, it's the extra bandwidth and throughput of data can't hurt, can it? Okay, so Okay, so nearly loaded. Right, here we go. Right, let's have a look at what we're using here graphics wise. So, full screen, UHD, 60 Hertz, extra, normal for filtering, everything's on, shadow maps on, let's put that onto extra I suppose as well. Motion blur is on medium. I'm not really a great fan of motion blur, but we'll stick it on high. Ambient occlusion high. HPAO is probably the better one. We've got FXA, but we'll turn the anti-aliasing off in this instance. Don't need to super sample. And ragdoll is on. And okay. So did that save that? Yeah, okay. So what have we got? 47, 45, 54 frames per second. 65, 63. So it's oops. Bit of jerkiness there. Now that is definitely loading the assets off the disk, so that would be better if that was coming off an SSD. And so 59, 57. I mean, it feels nice, feels smooth. If I enable VSync, obviously to try and change some options to get down to the 60 frames per second, it would be better. I'm gonna die. Don't know what I've got this set to actually. Again, you know, you drop this down to full HD, you can maximize everything out, no problem. And if you were using a monitor, which you know, has G-Sync or anything like that, or FreeSync, you're gonna benefit from that, I suppose, and make things look nice and smooth, even if the frame rate is running a little bit less. And plus, if you're running, if you're running a 1440p resolution a screen that can do 1440p at 60 Hertz, chances are this system would knock that out no problem as well. Just dropping it down from 2160p to 1440p would probably have a fair enough hit to drop this down enough. Ooh, God, getting killed a lot. Let's save and quit this. To drop the resolution down to maintain that stable 60 frames per second. But that's Modern Warfare Remastered. And can I quit this? How do I quit this? Okay. Let's show you Project Cars. Let's do a car racing game quickly. This camera's really blowing out this screen. So let's bring this up again. I think I loaded this up with UHD settings before as well. Okay, Bandai Namco Bandai. Okay, let's look at the options here. So, visuals. Yeah, so we're UHD. I've got a few things set to high, primarily high, I think, on this one. You can put things up to ultra. Yeah, I haven't even changed anything, so why would that change? Okay, let's go back. Nope. I'm going to do a quick race in UAE, or Dubai, sorry, UAE, in a Formula B car. And we'll see what this is like. I think there's 19 cars on track, I think it said. And the mirrors and everything else are set to high, so probably dropping the mirrors off would help the frame rate. But let's start it up and see what we've got. So, loading up, we're at 52. 58, 62. With all these cars on the track. That will take a hit as we drive along. If I drive better. So we're still at 58, 59, UHD mode. So let's try and go around a few of these cars. 67. You know, for a portable little system like this, to take away, just unplug it, take it away with you, bring it to your friend's house or wherever, and just plug it into your telly, and have all these options available to you to change whatever you want and play as many games as you want. I find this system very, very special. Really special. There is an EN1080 version that's got announced last week by Zotac, which builds on the EN980 they had last year. And that's a water-cooled device, so it's slightly bigger than this one. It's slightly higher as it has a radiator and a fan in there. But obviously, you're going to get that extra level of performance from the graphics card over what the 1070 would do. But of course, that increases the size of the chassis and everything. So, in my opinion, I'm just really blown away by this particular unit, because just for the size of what it is, the power that's inside, and the potential for what it can do, so you can play all your games, is just fantastic. I think, you know, we're still in the 60s, 70s as I get away from less cars on the screen into the 80s. Oops, I'll try not to hit the wall. I'll just do one lap and I'll call it on this one. Get out of the way. Okay, we're down to 60, so we've got the grandstand and everything else. Lots of things needed to be rendering here. The bloom effects. Look around. You can see the wing mirrors are in full. I can look behind. Still in the 60s and 70s. You know, absolutely fantastic. More than playable. In fact, it's perfect. 80, 84. Okay, so that's Project Cars. Let's see what else I can play for you. Oh yeah, 57. I've got time. Hopefully YouTube will allow me to put this up without having to split the video, but we'll see. So another one that came out recently was the Elder Scrolls Skyrim Special Edition. Now, one thing I noticed about this game, and I'm going to play it, I think, in 1080p and show you if the options, where are the options gone? Go back. So I'm going to put this as ultra quality on 1080p. Okay. The reason being, because I just want to show what this performance is like. When I played it at UHD, even when I put it at ultra, I was getting around about 40 at ultra quality UHD. I was getting about 42 for the intro sequence anyway, which is what I'm going to show you here. I was getting about 42 to 45 frames per second. Putting it on high, I was getting about let's see, about maybe 2 or 3 frames per second higher, and putting it on medium, again, maybe only 2 or 3 frames per second higher. So it was strange, the Ultra HD settings, that as much as I was changing the variables in that instance, there wasn't really a massive increase in performance from the frames per second. So that's why I put it up to just full HD, and just to try out the introduction sequence. We'll see what this is like. Skyrim, an absolutely massive game which people really love, and I'm guessing, given it's a Bethesda game, I haven't got Fallout 4, but if you're into these kind of RPG level type games, I think Fallout 4, you could probably get similar performance as to what you're seeing here on Skyrim. So yeah, you see this has no, I couldn't find a VSync option in this, but it seems to be enabled, because I always seem to get 59.9, 60 frames per second on Ultra, and yeah, I mean, it looks as good as you can expect from Skyrim, which is now a five-year-old game, I think, maybe 4 or 5-year-old game. But obviously, with all these remastered special effects of volumetric fog and everything, and lighting effects and stuff that they've implemented into it, and trying to change shadow maps and stuff, which look weird in certain instances, because his guy's face has gone really dark. But yeah, I'm looking around 58.9. See, I've dropped a frame. Not too bad. And I think just around the corner down here, after the introduction, is the world opening up into like a town area. So that might tax the GPU a little bit more. So we can see the GPU on this instance has pushed itself up to 1600 megahertz, nearly 1550, and it's running at 70 degrees, which is fine. These GPUs are designed to go up to primarily 85, I think it is, before the fan really kicks in. Fan is on this. I can just about hear it if I really concentrate, but it's not that audible. So whatever the cooling system Zotac have implemented on this box really works very well. Now this is interesting. Okay, so I'm going down to 30 frames per second there. I'm guessing that was probably what I was saying about Call of Duty insofar as it's streaming the assets for the world into the game, and that 5400 RPM hard drive is probably being a bit of a bottleneck there. So we're nearly up to 1600 megahertz as we go into the town area. Still on 60 frames per second, which is good. Can look all the way around the world. Say hello to that dude. Look up his skirt. And yeah, I think that pretty much gives a good demonstration of what you're going to get. Like I say, if I play this on UHD, if I try and change this now, let's have a look and see. No, you can't change it in the game, unfortunately. You can only change certain options. So it has to exit the game and go back in again, which is a pain. But take my word for it. It's in UHD. It's in around the mid 40s, which is probably, you know, what the GPU is capable of, I guess. Without, you know, you'd have to drop certain settings. The weird thing was, like I say, changing it from ultra to medium garnered about 2 or 3 frames per second, which maybe goes to show that this game needs a little bit more driver support or optimization before that can work a little bit better. Okay, so what have we shown here? We've done Grand Theft Auto, we've done Doom, we've done Project Cars. I can show you Infinite Warfare, I suppose, which is the new Call of Duty. This at UHD mode does take a hit on the graphics card. Does push things quite a lot. At 1080p, it's pretty much flawless, I think, from what I recall. I haven't actually had a chance to game much on this yet. It's been, a lot of it was just doing the setup, the configuration, and getting everything running as I wanted it. So let's go campaign and just resume. Get it loading up. Interesting, so we've got MSI Afterburner on the top left, NVIDIA on the top right, and the in-game frames per second counter in the top right as well, all competing, showing the most accurate value of your frames per second. So let's see how long this takes to load. And at the moment it's pulling about 80 watts from the power from the wall, whilst it does this idling process of loading in the assets for the game. This is at UHD mode as well. The easy way to check is you can see the MSI Afterburner isn't zoomed in as much. Excuse me. So the MSI Afterburner values are don't look as massive on screen as before when I was running it on Skyrim. Obviously, with a SATA 6 connector on there, you know, a higher RPM hard disk in there would increase the asset streaming. But be careful if you put like a 7200 RPM drive in there, then that's going to have some major issues with heat. You know, it's obviously hot enough as it is. So we're at 60 frames per 55, 60. What have I got in here? I've set this. Right, okay, so we're running at UHD mode, but I did change some things here. Right, okay, so what I like about some of these newer games that are coming out is the render resolution. So in this instance, even though my monitor, or this TV doesn't support 60 hertz at anything other than 1080p and UHD, full HD and UHD, you can tell the game if it's been taxed too much to render the resolution lower than what the actual display is going to the monitor. So even though this is getting UHD 3840 by 2160, I've dropped it down to this 2688 by 1512 to try and make sure that I hit as close to a 60 frames per second buffer as possible. And this has got everything maxed out apart from that. So you can see how close this is to getting to 60 frames per second. You know, it's only, you know, it's just above 1440p really. At 1440p, if you had a monitor at that resolution, you'd be playing this game 60 frames all maxed out, no problem. So we're in around 55, 56. Nice big pointer in the middle of the screen, get that out of the way. Oops, where am I? Where's my reticule? Okay. So again, more than playable. And I think I've got this set to really hard, so a veteran, so I'm probably going to die with without my mouse and keyboard. Oh god. Okay. 70 frames per second. You know, games like this, you need a critical frame rate, stable frame rate. So if I was to enable VSync and lock this at 60, that would be pretty much the ideal scenario. One thing I've noticed as well with these games is don't trust the VSync in the game. If you can, always have VSync disabled in the game itself, and I've died. And enable the VSync in the NVIDIA control panel, because different games handle VSync in a vastly different way. So if you set the graphics card control panel to enable VSync by default for all games for the monitor, it will maintain a much stabler frame rate than having to rely on each game's VSync settings, because you tend to find little micro stutter and everything else. I find anyway, you get little micro stutter effects in games that are running their own VSync or trying to hit the VSync of your monitor without being any input from the actual graphics card software itself. Okay, so that's pretty good. I think I ran one of 3D Mark values earlier. This was Firestrike Ultra, I think. Yeah, 1.1. There was a score. It was, you know, pretty good. Not amazing, but it's pretty good. Better than 35% of all at this result. The CPU in this instance will really kind of have a major impact on these scores. But you know, in games, that's not really, as I've shown you, it doesn't seem to be much an issue in a lot of games that are out there right now. Let's have a look at the values that came back. So we hit on the core for the i7, we were hitting 68, which is fine. It's nice and consistent. The clocks for the core were 2496, so we didn't get up to 2800, but 2496, so 2500 megahertz by the looks of it. And where are we? We're at 51 for the 51 Celsius for the hard drive, 61 for the SSD, which I think is okay. It seems to be working okay anyway, put it that way. We got to 73 degrees on the GTX 1070, which is fine, not a problem at all. That's not too bad for a little box. So from a Windows Store perspective, let me show you Gears of War 4, because it has a really good built-in benchmarking utility actually. And again, this just goes to show that you can run the games as you would expect, and Windows 10 from the Windows Store on this little Zotac EN1070 without too much of a problem. Trying not to waffle on too much, I'm sure I'm boring everybody, but I'll try and give you as much of a... I know some people I've seen other videos of the other EN series, and maybe they've just looked at the box and maybe unboxed it, and people have been annoyed and said, well, how do I actually know what this actually does? You know, hopefully I'm giving you as much of a demonstration of the power of this little unit as possible. Okay, let's load this up. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. Right, okay, where have I got the options on this? Options, right, okay, so we're running it. Now again, this is a good example of, I can set this to the higher resolution, the Ultra HD from my screen, but if I don't think I'm getting the right performance for what I want, or if I don't want to drop the things like the texture detail and everything else, I can scale the resolution down. So in this instance, I'm scaling it down to 1440p, but everything else is pretty much maxed out on Ultra. The default quality setting is Ultra. I like this a lot in games as they're coming out now, because, and I think it specifically benefits anybody that has a UHD TV more so than a monitor, because like I say, a lot of TVs, I didn't realize this myself until I bought this UHD TV, that they will limit the 60 hertz refresh to only specific resolutions, and surely, you know, as we go forward in time, you wouldn't want, you know, UHD is going to become easier and easier to get with more these graphics cards that are going to come out in the future. I mean, if this version of the Pascal GPU is doing this as well as it is now, you know, the next version, the Volta, I think, is the next model, or what to call it, name for the next generation of GPUs from NVIDIA, for instance, and the Zen architecture, I think, from AMD. You know, UHD will become the standard, so 60 Hz UHD will be fine. But for now, if you want to play your games whilst looking as good as possible, then the dynamic resolution option is certainly something that seems to be very useful. I think what I like about this is that it creates it as a stable. This is a 1440p image. This is what you're going to get, and that's it. The consoles try and change it slightly when they do it on the fly. You'll see in the Xbox One in particular, they'll say it's like 900p one time, it's down to 720p, then it's back up to 900p, and it's a good way of maximizing the potential of the hardware, given the hardware limitations of those particular boxes. But I would certainly prefer myself that you have a, whoa, that's an interesting camera angle, isn't it? Inside JD's head. I would prefer to have anything, as much consistency as possible, so a consistent frame rate and a consistent resolution. So there's really good feedback. This is the best feedback of any game benchmark I've seen. So hats off to the Coalition and what they've done with Gears of War. But you can see straight away it's saying it's 97.7% GPU bound. So that's perfect. It's almost saying I'm using all of your GPU to hit all of these, this average frame rate of 56 frames per second in the game, and using all these different settings as well. So that's absolutely spot on. You know, if I put that up to UHD, that'll go down to 40s, I would have thought. So in fact, let's do it just whilst I'm here. Let's play around and change that up. So the other thing is, if you really want to be a narcissist, you can go to, look at that, all those stupidly high resolutions. I would think I'd probably set the box on fire if I set it up to those. So we won't do that. Right, what am I going to here? 2160, isn't it? So go back up. Right, okay, and keep that. Okay. So it's a scaled resolution is 100%, so it's the native resolution of the unit, and of the TV, and we'll benchmark that. So at 1440p, we're seeing about just under 60 frames per second as the average frame rate. This will probably drop significantly. So we're in the 30s as the current frame rate, 31. So still not bad. You know, everything is set to ultra, so you could drop some of these things down if you wanted to. From the wall, I'm pulling 120 watts of power, so given the performance that we're getting out of this, and what power has been pulled from the wall, I think that's pretty impressive still. And it's a pretty stable, consistent 30 frames per second, 31, 30. You know, and that's, I think if you play this on Xbox One or anything else right now, it's at 30 frames per second anyway, so yeah, so down to 28s, 27s. There's some of these effects come into effect, like the shifting of the wind and these different physics effects. But I think for the sake of playability, dropping that dynamic resolution renderer down is still fantastic. I think it still looks amazingly good. There we go. So we're 99.9% GPU bound now. Okay, and we got a, what did we get? Average frame rate 28.4. So, okay, that's fine. I can deal with that. So that's a Windows Store game. I have Forza 3 on there as well, but that's similar, if I'm honest, from what I've seen so far. So let's wrap this up with, from the game perspective, with an Origin game, and we'll do Battlefield 1, which is a particular GPU killer. And let's get this running. I don't know if you've heard the fans at all through this microphone I'm using, but it's only a tinny microphone, so it's not the greatest in the world. But again, it sounds like a PS4 at maybe, you know, at its worst. That's what this sounds like. So I think that's more than acceptable for what we're getting in this day and age anyway. Now, from what I tested of this briefly yesterday, 1080p Ultra, if I remember correctly, was not a problem. I was just trying some of the campaign out. So let's go to the campaign. Oops, no, go back there. Okay. So I'll continue. Oops, cancel. Continue playing Breakdown. So this is up at UHD at the moment. Can't remember what I have this set to, but we'll check it out in a second. Again, the dreaded loading time. Interesting how the GPU speed, it's at 1443 megahertz at the moment. I think I've seen that drop down to like 1200, 1300, sorry, not 12, low 1200, or high 1200, maybe low 1300s playing this game. It's intriguing how the different games seem to tax the GPU more. Obviously based on the different engines and scenarios, whether it's indoor, outdoor, all that kind of stuff. The complexity and the level. Wouldn't it be nice to be getting D3, D11, 200 frames per second? Okay, right. What am I looking at here? So I'm at 42, 43 frames per second. Let's have a look at the options. Okay, so we're at Ultra HD, 60 Hertz, and advanced, everything is set to medium by the looks of it. So if I'm going to show you, let's put that up to Ultra. Turn off anti-aliasing, because that really is a killer at this point. And we'll leave it at that. And you can see straight away. Okay, so 33 frames per second. So again, it's similar to the Xbox, to Gears of War scenario. You know, running everything at Ultra and 30 frames per second is definitely within reach for this game. Do some scouting here. Yeah, 31, 32. No real problem. Lots of fog effects. The sky looks great. The haze. There's a lot of density in the ground. You know, a lot of foliage and everything else. Lots of buildings on screen. The draw distance is well out. It's still very impressive, I think. Let's change this then to... Right, where was I? Let's go down to low and see what happens. So that pushes up into 50s, 45, 46. So cuts out some of the effects and you get pop in. You can see there's things changing as you approach everything. Not the most desirable, but still amazing how it still can't get 60 even on low UHD on this graphics card. The GPU isn't being taxed because it's only at 50% use at the moment. So the CPU, sorry. So this is looks like a severely GPU laden game. Now resolution scale, internal resolution. Okay, why is that 125% actually? Let's put that back. What does that change? Oh, now we're up to 70s. That's pretty good. Why was that so high, actually? Okay, let's try up the details again to medium. I like how games like this you just allowed to do it on the fly internally without having to reset the game and everything. So hats off to DICE and their Frostbite engine for that. Yeah, we're in the 50s now. Again, that would probably, if I change that to custom and turn off anti-aliasing, what does that do? Yeah, adds up another, so we're into nearly 60s now with medium at UHD, which isn't too bad. So let's try getting everything up to ultra again. Again, turn off anti-aliasing and maybe drop the resolution scale down to 90. Okay, there you go, we're up into 50 frames per second now. Yeah, it still looks gorgeous. With everything still on ultra, this game looks absolutely fantastic. And I have to say, I really like these scaling, these having control over these options to scale back what you need to improve the performance of your particular setup. I think is a really big plus point for the PC in general, and why I got rid of all the consoles and stuff and just went for this particular box, because I think it's hard to beat for performance. So let's take him out and try to. This gun is terrible. I think I've kicked everybody off here. Oh, this is good, isn't it? Oh, he's manning that. Oh, okay. God, I need a mouse and keyboard in this game. So lots of stuff on screen. I'm hitting 60 frames per second. Like I say, oh my God, there's more coming in. I'm definitely going to die here. This is not a good controller game. Wow. Okay. Poor Daniel Edwards has died. I think that's a pretty good optimized config for this game, though. You know, you enable VSync again, and you're pretty much going to hit 60 frames per second all the way, even though it's set to. I'd say that's probably dropping it down towards the 1440p resolution again. But I have to say, when the screen is set to UHD, and that, even though the renderer is downscaled, it doesn't look that bad. It looks pretty damn good, if I'm honest. I'm very impressed. Again, a tiny little box, a little Zotac EN1070 is what's delivering that. So it's really impressive. Okay, so that's Battlefield 1. And I'm not sure what else I can actually show you at this stage. So let's quit out of this. Games like FIFA and everything else run at 4K, all maxed out, no problem. There's not that much in those games. Rocket League is the same. Battlefront runs really well at 4K as well. Titanfall 2, something similar. It has the dynamic resolution option, which you can change to try and improve your performance on that, but still looks great. So that's pretty much everything I can show you probably in here. Although, so we've already looked at that. Here's an interesting little sidebar. So we've got here on the screen, if I show you here, and I haven't put a video up on this. I will put this up probably around the same time I did this video. But see, it's the Dolphin bar, which is just a Bluetooth adapter with a USB connector on it. I'm just going to plug this in, and of course, because this is a PC, you get the versatility of using different things like emulators. So I'm going to quickly show you this. And the config, this is Dolphin. The config is set up to use the Dolphin bar to allow you to connect your Wiimotes directly to your PC. And also you can upscale, so you can set the graphics to, and this is 3840 by 2160, and we can do enhancements like Internal resolution is bumped up towards 4K with 4x MSAA, 16x anisotropic filtering. Yeah, good for me to say that one. And so you can play your games like this. So this is, you can see here, I'm totally going to use this. I'm not trying to lie to you. This connects directly to that dolphin bar. You can see the lights are on there now. If I turn this off, you'll see when the lights goes off. If I turn it back on again, it connects up directly. No configuration beyond what is done straight away is required. And it has full control for your nunchucks, your Wiimotes, your whatever else. And you get the benefit of taking your games and upscaling them to different values. And I think I haven't configured this, have I? Oh well, let's have a look. What did I do here? 1 second. Stop the emulation. Did I configure my config? Let's have a look. No, it's not that. Controllers. Okay, real remote. Okay, that seems to be working. Let's try again. Probably didn't like it that I turned it off and back on again during the game. So, of course, with emulation, you know, everything runs on everything. You know, there's lots of things that run on things like Raspberry Pis and everything now, but you can still get all those kind of emulators as well for your Windows PC, and there's Wii U emulators out there now and everything else, like PSP emulators, all kinds of different things. And be able to, there we go, that's better. So you can see I can point my controller at the screen and say, yeah, I want to play as him. And the bizarre thing about this is, if I get past this initial, this gives you a good demonstration of this actually. If I get past the introduction of Super Mario Galaxy here, obviously this game was designed for the Wii, which was a 480p system, I think it was, back in the day. And I'm blowing this up to 4K resolution now. Oh, come on, come on, come on, come on. Right. Yeah. Hello, Peach. Here we go. So, how crisp does that look? It's absolutely ridiculous how just the fidelity of that image is just phenomenal. And the weird thing is, if you look online, there are projects out there which are dedicated to changing all the textures in Mario Galaxy and some other games like from Nintendo to up to 4K resolution. So making this look even better. And it just looks fantastic. Mario looks amazing on this game, just configured this way. But the weird thing is, when you go from in-game to something like a cutscene, it goes from looking this good, woohoo, to this, which is quite clearly a fuzzy mess of 480p video. But that's obviously what was designed for the Wii U at the time, and obviously it's pre-rendered, so that's not going to change in these scenarios. But the change from the 4K image of the gameplay to this is pretty crazy. But again, quite easy to just go and stop the emulation and away you go. Obviously, it's a grey area, but only use the games that you have. Is what I would say. Okay, I think I'm an hour and a half into this video. I think the final thing I will wrap up with, and some people might ask me about this, is how have I set this up. So let me just reboot this. Back to the main menu again. So, Zotac EN1070, I've unboxed it for you, I've shown you the internals of the system, I've shown you it booting SteamOS, shown you it booting KODI, I've showed you it booting Windows 10, demonstrated the games on SteamOS, the limitations, obviously it would be in 1080p, certain driver related issues because drivers don't get updated as much as they seem to do on Windows, so the performance is hit by that, but certainly as a platform it works fine. The controller works fine, the Steam controller. If you have a wireless Xbox 360 or wireless Xbox One controller, they will work with it as well. Windows 10, you get all the benefits of the newer drivers from NVIDIA that come out with the profiles for the particular games as they release, and also you get GeForce Experience. I love the fact that there's dynamic resolution scaling, a lot of these things to get as much performance out of this configuration with the GPU and CPU as possible. I really thought that the CPU would be a really crippling factor in a lot of games, but as I've shown you, it doesn't seem to be the case in a lot of instances. The games work really well. I would have preferred if they'd gone for a higher rated, a HQ rated like CPU, like the, I don't know, the 6700 HQ that's in the Skull Canyon Intel board. But that might have increased the heat output that was coming from this box. Obviously the cost as well, which I'll get onto maybe at the end. But the 6400T certainly seems to do a really reasonable to good job from what I've seen from all the games. I'm just going to load up Parted Magic 2012 here, go to the Linux desktop quickly to show you some of the configuration. But I'm hopefully giving you as good an overview of this system as possible to really show you that I think, personally speaking, I know the EN1080 is out there. It's a more expensive box. It's 1080. It's got a 1080 GTX, full fat 1080 GTX GPU in there, so you'll get better performance. It's got a water cooling system in there as well. But it is a bigger box. It's a bigger unit. I think it's got 2 power supplies that it requires to run as well. One for the GPU and one for the main system. This is just one box, one tiny box, showing you in comparison to just a standard Blu-ray case with one power supply of 180 watts, typically pulling about 120 to 130 from the wall, which I think is phenomenal power that you're getting for what it's using electricity wise. So here's just Linux running this Parted Magic. If I show you the partitioning I've done on here with gparted, anybody who's out there that might be interested in setting this kind of system up, what I've done is I've set up a primary partition of 500 megabytes, which doesn't need to be that, but you could get away with probably 300 for the Windows reserved partition, a 500 megabyte partition for the Grub 2 bootloader, and afterwards I then set up an extended partition using the rest of the space that was available. From there, go and install Windows. It will automatically pick up the NTFS. Make sure that obviously the first one is NTFS, the second one is ext4. It will pick up the NTFS primary partition and use that as the Windows reserve drive, which it requires. When you're doing certain Windows updates, you have to reset the boot partition back to that one so that Windows updates will work correctly. Otherwise, Windows falls over itself. It's a bit of a limiting factor. But anyway, install Windows. It will install itself into the extended partition, and from there you can use tools like what I've got here, which is gparted, to resize it. I resized the Windows 10 partition down to 40 gig because I'm not using it for anything else other than the OS itself. You can see I'm using 25 gig right now. This is the anniversary update of Windows 10. And then I used a 500 gig marked as the flag was a diag drive, just in case I needed that. A 500 meg, sorry, Windows diag drive. From there, you can use any sizes you need. Typically 9.7 gig to 10 gig is what's needed for the SteamOS as default for its system drive, its recovery drive, and the swap drive. Afterwards, any space that's left over is considered to be the home drive, where you would install your games and all the relevant information for your account is stored. LibreELEC requires a 500 megabyte partition for the operating system itself. Afterwards, you can define any space you want as space available for it to store its information, like its images and add-ons and any files you want to copy onto the box on the operating system for that particular OS. It will read, if you put something else into like the Windows partition or whatever else, it will read it from there as well if you wanted to. But that's how I've set that up for now. And hopefully that's it, guys. It's a bit longer than I expected it to be, but I hope I've given you as much information as possible. I might, if anybody asks if they want to see the Grub bootloader config files for what I've used on this system, I can put them onto Pastebin or something. Just maybe drop me a line and I'll add it into the I'll either reply to you or I'll put them into the description of the video itself. And yeah, like I say, I'll scroll back down. We have that box is doing everything I need, video game wise, emulation wise, media playback wise. Some of the software will get updated as well for the media playback. I've no doubt about that soon for 4K and everything else. The KODI operating system was running in 4K without any issue. I can't fault it. I think that's the best thing about it. So price wise, the unit cost me about 1,300 quid, pounds, UK sterling. So that's expensive. You know, you consider that the PlayStation Pro is 350, I think, £350. You're looking at £1,000 extra. That's expensive. For me, it boiled down to the fact that I didn't want my Xbox anymore. I didn't want my PS4 anymore. I sold them both. I'm not buying a PS4, so there's money saved on that. And I decided, you know what? I want a system that's as powerful as it gets today, that will last me as long as possible. I hope that the reliability is Zotac. I've had Zotacs in the past and they've been very good. And is as versatile a machine as possible. Does everything that I want to do, obviously, and is an open platform. I can do whatever I want to it and configure it as much as I want. I don't want to be having the limiting factor of what Sony provide me or what Microsoft provide me on those Xboxes or PS4 platforms. I'm not dissing those platforms. They serve a purpose and they're very good at what they do. But I like to be able to play with as much power as I can get as possible and performance and do as much as I can with these systems and learn as I go along the way. So my hat's off. Absolutely, my hats off is to Zotac. I think you've created an absolutely stunning piece of hardware. You know, the only thing like I said earlier, I would say would maybe a larger base cover to allow for more airflow to go in for the hard disk units, the SSD and the hard disk. But apart from that, I'm absolutely blown away by what it actually delivers. So. Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video and you've got as much information as possible, and maybe I'll try and do some more in the future. Bye.